Welcome to the Painting Coach, and today we're painting everyone's favourite blacksmith and Logan Grimnar's personal champion. It's Arjac Rockfist. A huge thank you to Games Workshop for sending me this model early so I can create this content. Let's get painting. Now the first thing I've done is primed Arjac with Wolfkin Grey and then sprayed white scar across the top, and I've used an airbrush of Russ Grey to get a nice smooth base coat. You absolutely don't need an airbrush for this stage though. You can absolutely paint this on, and if you've seen my Logan Grimnar tutorial, that's exactly what I did there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to shade all of the armour, and the colours we're going to use for this are Space Wolves Grey contrast paint mixed 50-50 with contrast medium and a little dash of black Templar contrast paint. So what I've done is 4 parts Space Wolves Grey, 4 parts contrast medium, and then just a little dip of black Templar. I've mixed this all together and I'm now going to paint it into all of the recesses across Arjac's armour, making sure that I get some nice shading in there, particularly working it into all those nooks, crannies, crevices where we're going to get a bit of a shadow area. Once that's dry, I'm going to go in and paint all of the black elements using AK Black. Now, you can use whatever black paint that you've got. For me, I'm looking to paint that big shoulder pad. I'm looking to paint the strap on the bottom of the hammer. And I'm also looking to paint all of the armor joints. So I'm making sure I've got a good tip on my brush, not a huge amount of paint, and I'm just working it into all of these areas. Try not to make any mistakes, but if you do, it's not the end of the world because we are going to go in and tidy it all up later. Next, I'm going to base all of the grey elements. The colour I'm using for this is Eshin Grey. So I'm going to paint things like the Crux Terminatus on the left shoulder. I'm going to paint the Crux on the right shin and any other elements such as those rune pennants that are going to ultimately end up being a nice grey colour. I'm also going to paint the tabard as well. And it's at this point I realised leaving the hammer arm off probably would have made it a lot easier to paint, as would leaving the shield off, but we're here now. Next up, we're going to base all the silver elements. Now, the colour I'm using for this is steel from Pro Acryl. If you've got dark aluminium or lead belcher or Surcoat silver, they're absolutely fine. Just want to make sure that we've got nice, even coverage of this silver. So there's a fair bit to do on the model. We've got that hammer head. We've got some elements of the hammer mechanism. We've also got the anvil across the back of Arjac's armour and some elements on the shield as well. If you're not 100% sure, check the box art. Of course, don't forget his tools that he's got around his waist and the belt buckle. Next up, we'll do all of the gold. Now, I like a nice brassy gold on my Space Wolves, so the colour I'm going to use for this is Balthasar Gold. I'm going to carefully work my way around the model. So we've got the iron halo on the top of Arjac's armour, we've got the rim around the shield, and also we've got all those elements, such as the set for his rune on his chest and also on the hammer. Again, if you're not 100% sure which bits you need to paint with the gold, just check the box art. We're now going to shade all of those elements at the same time using some Nuln Oil. So we're going to shade the grey, the silver and the gold. This is a nice, easy and straightforward part. Just make sure not to overload your brush with Nuln Oil because we don't want to spill it and we certainly don't want to create any heavy pools with it across the model. So just work it across all the areas we've just painted and make sure we get it into those recesses. The first highlight we'll do is going to be with chrome from Vallejo Model Air, but if you've got Runefang steel or shining silver, that's absolutely fine. What we're looking to do here is drag this across all the sharp edges that we've got across all the little bits of silver on the model. So predominantly the anvil decorations and also that huge hammerhead. So we're dragging your brush with a good tip, not too much paint. You should get a really nice crisp highlight on all of your silver. Next, we'll highlight all of the gold, and the first colour we're going to use for this is Sycorax Bronze. Now, very similar to what we did with the chrome from the previous stage, we can drag it across some of those sharp edges to get nice crisp highlights. Where we're going to do this slightly different across the shield is we're going to paint quite large parts of the gold rim just to give the impression of all the light reflecting. So we're going to focus this across the top half of the shield, and then the bottom half we're just going to do some edge highlights. The final highlight we'll do on all the gold is going to be with the Canoptek Alloy. And all we're looking to do this is drag it across those sharp edges that are catching the most light. So make sure you work across all the model. There are a fair few elements where we can do this. And this will give us a really nice edge highlight that really does set off that gold. We'll go back to Eshin Grey for the next step. And essentially what I'm looking to do here is drag my brush along anything that's black that I want to highlight. So this is fairly easy and straightforward. Now I have actually painted Arjac's beard as well because I realized that that was more of a black than a grey colour. So I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to highlight across that leather strap on the hammer. And the other thing I'm going to do is highlight the top of that black shoulder pad. Now, I'm going to do a little bit more of a volumetric highlight here. So I'm just going to push the paint towards the top of the shoulder pad. And that should give me a really nice highlight. That's just a little bit better than doing an edge highlight on the particular shoulder pad. I am going to edge highlight the studs and also any of the damage as well. Next up, I'm going to go in with some Dawnstone and start highlighting all of the grey areas. So firstly, I'm going to get the Crux Terminatus highlighted. Now, I'm going to paint the majority of this with the Dawnstone. I'm not just going to edge highlight, so I really want to work into these areas. And I'm going to paint quite a bit. So again, you'll notice I've got hardly any paint on my brush. I've got a really good tip. I'm using my Artis Opus size 3 brush. Now, if you want your own brush, you can use the link in the description. You can get up to 5% off your order as well, and it does support the channel. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as a final highlight on the black elements. So I'm just going to drag my brush along the edges inside the Eshin Grey from the previous step. And that's going to give me a really nice popping highlight on the black as well. Don't forget to highlight the tabard and also inside the Eshin Grey of that black shoulder pad. The final highlight I'll do on all of the grey is going to be with Administratum Grey, which is again a nice bright grey. And what I'm looking to do is paint this inside the Dawnstone of the previous stage, focusing on those elements that are facing upwards. Now this is nice and easy. It shouldn't take you too long to do. And you don't need a huge amount of paint. I'm still using my Artis Opus size 3, and I'm still getting a really nice crisp highlight on there. So just work your way around and add this in. Again, don't forget to just do some final highlights on that tabard to help it pop. We'll base all of the leather next using Rhinox Hide. So I'm going to do the straps across the greave and also that belt and Arjac's necklace. Once that's dry, I'm going to take some Doombull Brown and highlight the majority of those elements. So the Rhinox Hide really is just the shade. I'm going to paint the majority of them using the Doombull Brown. So this is going to give us a really nice browny red leather. So just take your time around those elements you've already finished. I'm also going to use these same colours to paint the wood on the handle of Arjac's hammer that he's got hanging from his waist as well. The final highlight on all the leather is going to be with some Skrag Brown. Now, generally with this, I just want to drag it across the shape of the model, get a nice crisp highlight. I don't want to use a huge amount, particularly on that belt, because it'll just push it to more of an orangey rust colour when I want to keep that Doombull as the predominant one. Moving on to the grip of Arjac's hammer, I'm going to take some Khorne Red and just paint this all over the handle, being very careful not to spill this on any of the gold or the armour. When that's dry, I'll shade it using some Nuln Oil. Now, I don't want a huge amount of Nuln Oil. I just want to work it into some of those recesses so that I get a nice shade on it. When that's completely dry, I've got a really nice dark red. So I'm going to go in with some Wazdakka Red just to highlight it. And really all I'm doing is taking this along those major strap areas, leaving the darker colour in the recesses and just building up a little bit of texture. I'll finish that highlight using some Squig Orange, and this is where I'm focusing more on the edges of those wraps on there, not going too mad, not going too overboard with it. I'm also going to use the Squig Orange on the hammer just to shift the colour of it slightly. Now I'm not using a huge amount, it's fairly thin, so as it dries it'll blend down. Next up, I'm going to take some Zandri dust and base all of the bone elements across Arjac. So there is that little bit of a rib cage that we've got on his base, but mainly I'm looking at all the teeth. So we've got the ones on his necklace and we've also got the ones on his left greave. To highlight the bone, I'm going to take some Screaming Skull. Now, generally, all I'm looking to do with this is just draw some lines. So I'm going to drag the brush across the teeth where I can to get that nice popping highlight. But generally, I'm just going to go down the outside edges, and that should give me enough. If you want to shade the inside with some Agrax Earthshade, you can, but I'm not going to bother. I'm going to paint all of the armour next. Now, one of the things I've done is go back in with Russ Grey and fix all the mistakes that I made and all the spillages. So this is why it pays to be just a little tidier, because it's going to take a lot less time. Having gone in and done that, I'm now going to highlight everything using Fenrisian Grey. So what I'm looking to do is, where I can, drag the brush along the sharp edges of the armour, because this gives me nice crisp highlights. Where I can't do that, I'm just going to very carefully draw the line highlight in. Now I'm going to take my time for this bit, again, because I don't want to go back in and fix any mistakes if I don't have to. If you put these highlights on a little thick, of course you can go back in with some Russ Grey and fix them. The final highlight on all the armour is going to be with some blue horror. Now I've switched to a smaller brush. I'm using my size 1 Artist Opus Series S for this, and exactly the same technique as we used in the last stage. All I'm looking to do is drag my brush across the sharp edges of the model, and this is going to give me a nice crisp highlight. The key here is to keep it inside the Fenrisian Grey from the last stage, and to use it fairly sparingly, focusing just on the sharpest edges of the model. I want to base all of the gems next and all of the lights on the teleporter mechanism that Arjac's got on his left hand, and I'm also going to paint the wolf on his right shoulder pad as well. So the colour I'm going to use for this is Corax White. Now thin it down a little bit, you should get some nice even coverage, and all I'm going to do is pop this over all the gems, all the lights, paint that wolf. And the other thing I'm going to do is, if you need to thin it down a little more, is paint it into all the runes that I want to be glowing, such as the ones on the hammer and the anvil across the top of the backpack, and also the one on the shield. I'm also going to paint the lightning bolts with this as well. Once that's completely dry, I'm going to thin down some AK white. And if you've got white scar, you can absolutely use that. You can also potentially use some white oil paint here, or some white ink, whatever you prefer, but I just want to paint it over that Corax White so I get a brighter white element in there, because we're going to be doing a little bit of a glow shortly. While I've got this AK white out, I'm also going to highlight the wolf on Arjac's right shoulder pad. So generally this is just an edge highlight, capturing all of the detail and just helping that pop a little bit. To paint all of the gems, I'm going to take some Baal Red contrast paint and just pop a very thin layer of this across all of them. This is going to give me a really nice bright red. Just be careful not to spill this on the gold frames. To add a little bit of a shine to the gems, I'm just going to mix some of that Baal Red in with the AK white and just dot this at the top of the diamond. And this is just going to be giving me a really nice and simple light reflection. To paint the yellow lightning bolts as well as the teleport homer on Arjac's wrist, I'm going to take some Imperial Fist contrast paint. And this is very easy. I'm just going to paint it over the white elements, being very careful not to spill this onto the grey-blue colour. When that's dry, I'll do a very quick edge highlight using some Dawn Yellow. If you haven't got Dawn Yellow, just mix some of the Imperial Fist contrast paint into white and you should get the same effect. To paint the glow, I'm simply going to take some Frostheart contrast paint and paint this over all of the white runes. Now, I want to paint this into them, but I don't want to leave it like that, because if I do, it's just going to leave a very deep bluey colour. So once you popped it in there, just clean your brush off and just move it to just soak up some of that paint, and that should give you a nice blue glow effect. If you want, you can go in and paint a little bit of white over it as well, but I'm quite happy with it just like this. The last thing we'll do on Arjac is paint his face. So the first thing I'm going to do is base this using some Cadian Fleshtone. Now, this did take me 2 coats to cover. Just make sure it's nice and thin so that you don't clog up any of the detail and you've got a nice even coat. I'm then going to shade using some Reikland Fleshshade. I'm not going to shade the whole part of Arjac's head. I'm just going to focus this into his eyes, around his brow, his nose, and around his ears and beard, because those are the bits that are going to be darkest, and it just makes the next step a little easier. When that's completely dry, I'm going to go back in with the Cadian Fleshtone and highlight those areas that are going to catch the most light. So we've got the top of his head, obviously, we've got his brow, we've got the nose, we've got the cheekbones and his ear, and I'm also going to paint some frown lines across his forehead, just to start to build up some of that texture on his flesh. Next highlight, we'll take some Kislev Flesh and paint this inside the Cadian Fleshtone from the previous step. So we're focusing on the same areas again. So again, the brow, the cheekbones, the nose, the ear, and we just want to keep it inside there and paint it inside the Cadian Fleshtone across those frown lines on the forehead as well, continuing to build up this highlight. Lastly, we'll take some Flayed One Flesh. Now, we're not going to use a huge amount of this. We just want to paint this inside the Kislev Flesh from the previous stage, making sure that we haven't got a huge amount on our brush and just being very, very careful, because this is a much lighter colour and it can really tip the hue of the face if we're not careful. And there we have it. Arjac Rockfist is done and ready for the tabletop. I'm really pleased with how he's turned out. This is a fairly easy and straightforward tutorial, and you can use all the tips and techniques here on all the rest of your Space Wolves as well. So I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave it a like and a comment down below. Make sure you tell all your friends, and I'd be really grateful if you can check out my other Space Wolves content here. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.